Hello and welcome to Opinion Roundup. I'm Associate Editor of the Moscow Times, Christopher Brennan, here with Opinion Editor of the Moscow Times, Michael Bohm, discussing the opinion pages of the Moscow Times in general, as well as the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. All right, Mike, so last time we were talking about possible sanctions against Russia, both those have already happened and ones in the future, and their impact on the economy. But it also kind of brings up the question, does a place like the US have a right to sanction Russia? Does it have the moral right to sanction Russia given previous action?
Yeah, I think every country has a right, a moral right, and it doesn't matter who is violating international law. If the world felt that the U.S. violated international law in Iraq, they could do the same thing. I think in terms of Obama, I think he has a clean conscience. I mean, can you think of a situation where under his presidency he violated international law?
Is there a difference, though, between the U.S. and Russia, given that U.S. sanctions do control things like MasterCard and Visa? And
of course, there's a difference. But that's the way the world is structured. But if you're talking about moral right, it's not so much a right of the U.S. It's the right of the world community, and that's why the UN is there. I mean, if you look at a similar situation when Saddam Hussein invaded Iraq in Kuwait in 1990. The whole world came and annexed Kuwait. And similar situation. The whole world, including the Soviet Union, came together and condemned it. So it's not a moral right of the U.S. The U.S. is a leader in the sanctions, but it's the obligation of all countries, in my opinion, to come together and sanction governments that violate international law.
So, in previous discussions, we've talked about Vladimir Putin's motives, whether it is more of a domestic move, whether it's kind of an action on the international stage. But we haven't talked kind of from the opposite side about the U.S. and Congress people there talking about stopping Russian aggression. Is the West reaction, are political actors there also kind of gunning for domestic support by, quote-unquote, standing up to Russia?
I think the first goal, and that's in the sanctions, is to dissuade Putin from going any further. The U.S. is sending clear signals of what would happen, what would be the second round of sanctions. As far as Lavrov and Kerry is concerned, I think there's several issues on the table. The first issue is maybe a exchange. Russia wants a federal model for Ukraine. The U.S. is saying for that you have to move forces from the Ukrainian border. The other issue is, will Russia recognize the May 25th elections? That's a key issue. I mean, if Russia does not believe that the current government is legitimate.
You think that's the basis of the conversations now between both Ukrainians and Russians and Westerns and Russians, kind of talking about the Ukrainian government itself?
Right now it's between the U.S. and Russia, Lavrov and Kerry. But those are the fundamental issues that they have to work out. Is will Russia be willing to even recognize the new government? It's clear they don't recognize the interim government. They think it was an illegal revolution. But that's all going to end on May 25th. There's going to be legitimate, hopefully legitimate, free and fair elections. What will Russian stance be there? And what will Ukrainian stance be? Will they recognize Crimea?
Do you think that if Russia's going to make a move, kind of another possible movement into eastern Ukraine, it would come before that? Before these May 25th elections and this idea of legitimacy?
No, I don't think it'll come at all. I think Putin knows when to stop, and I think he's going to stop when he's ahead, and he's clearly ahead now. He's going to have enough trouble absorbing Crimea, much less the whole eastern regions of Ukraine. So I think, at least I hope that, because I don't even know how the West would respond. Europe would not send forces. Obama would probably not send forces. What he would do is invoke the second round of sanctions. I think Russians would be willing to, or at least Putin would be willing to accept those sanctions but I really don't think it's going to come to that.
So in previous discussions, we've talked about Vladimir Putin having a possible domestic motive for bringing up this Cold War rhetoric, kind of talking about the resurgence of a Soviet-type empire. to play for domestic support. Do you think congresspeople in the West, et cetera, who are talking about standing up to Russian aggression, do they have kind of the same motive? Do they also want a return to this Cold War mentality?
I think if you're talking about Democrats, Obama certainly didn't need this. I mean, he needed the Crimea crisis like a hole in the head. Although there's a silver lining here. It did give him opportunity to appear strong, something he needed badly in an election year. Who's going to get the upper hand is an open question. I mean, Putin doesn't think the sanctions are much to be concerned about, the first round at least. As far as Republicans are concerned, John McCain Republicans at least, this is a good opportunity to say, I told you so.
Yeah.
For them, it's an opportunity to revive a new Cold War, something they're demonizing Putin.
Do you see the American public going along with that?
His supporters, sure. John McCain supporters say, well, look, here's the real Putin. Yeah. He's annexed territory, and he'll probably annex the eastern regions of Ukraine. What's maybe the Baltics next? Mm-hmm. So for them, this is a nostalgia for to return to the good old Cold War.
So long term, we've talked about Russia's relationship kind of with its economy going forward, its relationship with Ukraine. Do these tensions that we're seeing right now, do those fade away kind of after a little while, the same way they did with South Ossetia and Abkhazia, or do they linger on? Is this really kind of a new period in Russia as a world actor?
If Putin doesn't go any further than Crimea, I think what you'll probably see is this whole conflict settling down in six months to a year. If you look at the South Ossetia Abkhazia conflict, there were sanctions. They not so much sanctions, but Bush canceled certain U.S.-Russian programs, but they all returned within a year. And within a year, Obama was president, and he started the reset. Whether this is a different situation, probably worse than South Ossetia and Abkhazia, because Putin annexed territory. So it might take longer than a year.
Are the players different though? I mean, with the idea that some in the U.S. and the West do want a Cold War, and Russia, some factions of Russian politics do as well. Mm-hmm. Do people try and keep playing on this tension, especially given all the press that Vladimir Putin has gotten in the last year?
No, I don't think since Obama's in power, I don't think he's interested in playing off, exaggerating the Cold War. Mm-hmm. So I think he's interested. He's definitely interested in a diplomatic solution. Whether Putin is interested is another question. I don't think Obama will artificially prolong this conflict, but it takes two to tango. Putin may prolong it for the simple reason that he feels that Obama is weak. But my outlook is that pretty much if Putin keeps it at Crimea, mm-hmm. that this conflict could be resolved or go away in maybe 1 or 2 years.
Well, thank you, Mike, for your answers and for being with us again today. We'll see you next time on Opinion Roundup.